Okay, welcome everyone. We'll start, even though being an academic institution, we can expect students and academics to straggle in continuously for a few more minutes. My name's Chris Gregg, Director of the UQ Energy Initiative and the Dow Centre for Sustainable Engineering Innovation. Tonight is a UQ Energy Express seminar, but proudly co-sponsored by the Dow Centre. So in the Energy Express, we're about communication and outreach and facilitating leading-edge research towards a more sustainable energy future. And in the Dow Centre, we are looking at sustainable engineering innovations and how they can make a difference to materials, energy, food and water at a global scale. So tonight's event really brings those two initiatives together. We're pleased to have the Tritium founders here tonight, who are really quite a remarkable success story that emerged from UQ. And our speaker tonight is David Finn, who's the co-founder and the managing director of Tritium. And he's going to talk about electrifying transport and how that's driving innovation and Tritium's role in driving innovation in the energy sector from a transport perspective. So David's a strategic and innovative leader with broad business, management and engineering experience. He's led the really remarkable growth of Tritium, the company he co-founded since 2001. He's very passionate about bringing new cutting-edge technology to market, especially in the transport and energy sectors, and he's got about a decade of experience designing and implementing power electronic products. After David's keynote, he'll be joined by two of his co-founders, or not co-founders, but Chief Executive of St Baker Innovation Fund, which is I guess one of the key investors in the company, and also James Kennedy, who's one of his co-founders and the engineering director for Tritium. So if everyone can turn their phones on silent, please, or off, we'll kick off with David.
Thanks, Chris. Is that coming through on the mic? Oh, a bit higher. So as Chris said, we're all about electrifying transport. We're a Brisbane-based designer and manufacturer of DC fast charging infrastructure. These are chargers that can put 50 kilometres range into an electric vehicle, straight into the battery pack within 10 minutes. We're currently exporting these products to 12 different countries around the world, and that's rapidly growing. At this point in time, we have 57 staff, all highly experts in their field, and that's growing rapidly. In fact, we're going through 4 times per annum growth rate at the moment. So we're right in the middle of the J-curve, and it's quite exciting for us. What we're really about is building products that enable the uptake of electric vehicles. They impact the buying decision, and this is the thing about DC fast chargers. It's really important at the time of purchase to know that you have confidence in the infrastructure that's out there and around. So, and our fast charge that we've designed is seen in the bottom left corner here. It's our premises, and we've also won a whole bunch of awards over the last few years for the design and innovation in this product. But I want to start by just moving to what the market's doing, and I think that's an interesting thing to look at this point in time. Within the next decade, we will reach a tipping point where it's more commercially feasible to own an electric vehicle than it is to own a petrol vehicle. And when you couple that with the idea of the social imperative of having a zero emissions vehicle and the pressure that will put on people to make that decision, the tipping point's going to be fast. And we're going to see a very quick uptake. Last year, we passed 1 million electric vehicles on the world's roads. And those numbers surge each time you see a new release of an electric vehicle model onto the market. And the reason that is because there is a bit of a lack of options for people to buy. In Australia, we're actually only got 4 here at the moment, but overseas they have up to 20 different electric vehicle models that they can buy from, and that's rapidly expanding. There's 14 established car brands that have electric vehicle programs. These are all very, very big programs, some of them in the order of $1 billion each, and we see other leading brands enter the market space like Apple and Google. And new startup, or if you call Tesla still a startup now, they've been running as long as we have. But innovation that those startup companies are making in the space around some of their business models and some of the technology is really pushing these other vehicle manufacturers to innovate and fast follow. So we're seeing a lot of money being spent in the area, and really it's not a matter of, there's too much momentum. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when electric vehicles will become more commercially feasible than a petrol vehicle. And if you want to look to the future, you look to Norway. 20% of all new vehicle sales there now are electric. 5% of all vehicles on the road are electric. And when you look to what the Netherlands is doing with legislating that all diesel and petrol vehicles you'll not be able to sell diesel and petrol vehicles in the Netherlands by 2025. And India is exploring a similar target by 2030. So this all leads to, it's just a matter of time before this tipping point is reached. When you couple that with what we see happening with the cost of batteries too, this chart on the right shows the cost of solar reducing, this is the top line, with the cumulative production quantity per annum. And you can see a similar sort of cost curve being followed for lithium-ion batteries, which is one of the major costs in electric vehicles. And from what the actual data that we're getting from vehicle manufacturers, they're already indicating they're departing from this curve anyway and falling below it. So things are going to accelerate as the volumes increase. Just to give you some ideas, you don't see the vehicles on the road here in Australia, but there are a lot around, and all different types of car brands are doing it, like even Kia has the Kia Soul. You probably haven't seen that around. Volkswagen, the e-Golf would sell really well in Australia, but it's just not available. The e-Up, and you would have probably, if you've been watching, seen iMEVs around the place in Australia. But there's a whole bundle of different brands that are getting sold internationally. But because we don't have government incentives here in Australia, we don't see these vehicles on the roads yet. The reason why these incentives exist overseas, and when I talk about some of these incentives, some of them are fairly generous. In the US, there's a $7,500 tax credit you get for buying an electric vehicle. And some of the states over the last year or so have been matching that $7,500 tax credit. So you can imagine $15,000 off the price of your car, and all of a sudden it's cheaper to buy an EV than it is to buy a petrol car. And uptake rates, we're seeing the Nissan Leaf in Atlanta actually being the highest selling car, full stop, because of these incentives. The reason why the governments are incentivizing these things are really all around about cleaner, quieter cities, reduce particulate emissions in these cities, and reduce CO2 emissions. A lot of these countries have very clean grids, and so it's just a no-brainer for them to really go ahead and incentivize EVs. And so there's also a big lowered health burden on countries that incentivize these EVs as we go forward. Internationally, there's 3 million deaths per annum through air pollution, and many more people affected by asthma, heart disease, and reduced brain function. And half of all this air pollution internationally comes from road transport. So in the OECD, China and India combined, that's a cost of $3.5 trillion, and the road transport would be responsible for $1.7 trillion of this cost. So there's a big imperative there to reduce the emissions from road transport. And I'll show you later, the impact that we can have through passenger vehicles is quite significant before even addressing air, sea, and trucking. And personally, I don't understand being out there cycling around and running around on the roads why there isn't a greater imperative on reducing emissions on our roads, even here in Australia. But I'll loop back to that. This is a little bit busy, this slide, but I just wanted to talk about the intersection EVs is having on both the health, which I just spoke about, energy and transport sectors. In the energy sector, we're going to see EVs, what they are is a dispatchable load. They can be, especially when we have fast charging, you don't need to be charging all the time. You can choose when to suck down that solar when it's getting generated, or that wind when the wind is blowing. So that's an important feature for the grid going forwards. Just in general, every household that takes an EV represents a 28% increase to that household, and it's roughly a 28% increase on the grid in whole if we had 14 million passenger vehicles that were all electric here in this country. So that's an opportunity for the energy industry to increase their revenue in a climate at the moment where they have decreasing revenue due to energy efficiency improvements. On top of that, and I'll touch on this later, there's an opportunity to use electric vehicles as a distribution means for energy. So that's also an interesting innovation that hasn't had a lot of focus yet. And then finally, we have this second revolution that's going to occur in the transport sector around and what they call a virtuous cycle that's occurring between rideshare, driverless and electric. There'll be first the tipping point on EVs, but then very fast after that, we're going to see this convergence of these technologies. And the reason that is because it's actually the driverless car companies that are manufacturing these cars see the benefit in having smaller, lower cost electric vehicles, and the rideshare companies want to reduce their costs for operating. So it's very important to have an electric vehicle and also reduce their driver costs, so let's make them driverless. So, and there's a lot of co-investment all happening between these different companies overseas. And the growth is quite phenomenal. That's just rideshare companies. Almost all the vehicle manufacturers are talking about what they're doing around driverless. This is a concept car by Mercedes. Google have these things driving around at the moment, and we've had some experience charging those cars. To give you some context of what this means in terms of increased energy for the retailers and utilities of the world. One of our charging stations, this is one in Norway. This is charging cycles over a month. It's 50 kilowatt peak going to the car, and these are the cycles as they go into the car. So this is actually over energy used over a quarter. If you scale that up and divide it down by 365, you work out that it's basically representing about 4 new homes onto the grid, each charging station. This is a charging station that's only doing about 10 charges a day. We have stations that are doing 20 in parts of Norway. So, and when you start to think about the commercial feasibility of owning one of these charging stations, it kicks in about 8 charges a day. So you're doing 20, you're doing very, very well. And that's already happening with a lot of the utilities in Norway at the moment. And that's only with a 5% vehicle penetration. I should also note too is that this 4 new homes has been stationed in a place where the grid is already quite stable. So we might have put it just near a substation or in a built-up commercial area. We haven't had to augment out our stringing network around the suburbs to achieve that. So it can be a more cost-effective way of getting energy sold. This slide is looking at can we get zero emissions, true zero emissions driving in Australia from renewable energy sources. So what we've done here is gone through and looked at the energy usage in the transport sector as a whole. That's this chart here. This is Australian government data. So it's 450,000 gigawatt hours per year used by the transport sector. Now that is mainly made up of liquid fuels. The 14 million passenger vehicles in Australia use a bit over a third of that energy, so a bit over 150 gigawatt hours, 1,000 gigawatt hours of energy. If we convert all these 14 million, this is a theoretical exercise, if we convert all these 14 million passenger vehicles into electric vehicles, that drops down to a third of that again because of the efficiency of using electrons rather than liquid fuel, which is valid because the energy is coming straight as electrons from wind or from solar. Then we can see we're in the ballpark of being able to power this from the existing installed capacity of solar and wind generation in Australia. If we increase that 3 times, all of a sudden we can power every single passenger vehicle in Australia from renewable energy sources. Now, what does that mean in terms of CO2 emissions? The passenger vehicle, like vehicles, which can be addressed by existing electric vehicle technology, represents 62% of the emissions of the transport sector and 10% of the total emissions, CO2 emissions in Australia. And that's not even considering hydro. energy generation. So the one thing to realise about electric vehicle charging is it's not like filling up a petrol car. It's way more like owning a mobile phone and recharging a mobile phone. The grid is everywhere. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to see charging infrastructure in every single car park in the world. That's what we'd like to see. Very similar to Microsoft's vision of, a computer on everyone's desk is charging stations in every single car park. That's including work, home, public spaces. In the US, there's 800 million car parks in the US and only 300 million cars. So there's a very big opportunity there. And what that enables you to do is that you're charging slowly all the time. You have a lot of installed battery capacity on the grid. So at any point in time, that's dispatchable load for energy generation. In the home, we're working on that home and workplace. This is lower power unit, around 12 kilowatts. This is our current unit, 50 kilowatts, so really used for hub charging around cities, quickly bumping your energy in your battery pack up by about 50 kilometres or so at a time. And then you've got corridor. Now, this is where everyone's pushing at the moment. All the vehicle manufacturers want this. They're all working on cars that can drive 300 kilometres on one charge and recharge at 150 kilowatts. So that means that that 300 kilometres of range can be replenished in 20 minutes. So now you can make the buying decision to buy an EV and drive from Brisbane to Sydney and stop only 3 times. That is a choice that you can make as your primary vehicle. And that's when that will also impact the tipping point and make the decision very easy for people to make. So that's our 150 kilowatt unit in development at the moment, due for release next year. And of course, at every point in time, we aim for fast because it gives you dispatchable load and it gives convenience to the driver. So the standards at the moment allow for bidirectional flow of energy too. Because we are attached directly to the battery pack into the car, we can get energy to come back out of the car. And what that lets us do is use these vehicles as mobile storage. So you could charge in the workplace with your employer's solar system on their roof, put that in your car. He may even sell that to you. You could then drive home and run your house off that car. And when you talk about a 300 kilometre range, that's a 55 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's enough to run a home for a whole high energy use home for a whole 24 hours. So theoretically, you could come home and run your house off energy you brought from the public space or from the workplace every day. Not that I'm saying that that's how it would work, but it's an interesting thought that you could be transmitting that much energy over the road network. And so it's an alternative way of distributing energy to just the electrical distribution grid as we know it. I want to just pause for a little bit and move into, I've been talking very much about the market and where it's going and not much about our story and what we've done so far. And I thought that might be interesting to look at. So back in 1999, myself, and that is Paul, who's not here tonight, one of the other co-founders, and James, were racing the solar racing car, Sunshark, from Darwin to Adelaide. So that's where we really got a passion for electric vehicles, and seeing that vehicle sitting in the support vehicle behind it, driving from Darwin to Adelaide and not stopping, running on the power of the sun, really did foster the belief that this can be done. And when you look at where a lot of the technologies come from, you look at Tesla's drivetrain. You trace it back through AC propulsion, back through the Sunracer team, through the GM guys, and then back into Sunracer, which was one of the very early 1987 races that solar racing teams that won. So all that technology's evolved out of this industry, out of this, I guess, race over the last 3 decades now. So, and when we finished this in 2001, we actually designed our own motor controller for this car. We then got a few teams very interested in that and wanted to buy it. So we said, well, we don't want to sell that one. We'll make a new one. So we built this gold controller, started selling them. And then Queensland Government had a program, QSEF, Queensland Sustainable Energy Innovation Fund. Small grants, but really very good terms, 80-20 matching. So that came through and helped us design the Wavescopter X20, which is a 14 kilowatt system for solar car racing again. And then we ended up about 80% of the world's solar racing teams ended up using this product, and we're doing a fair bit of consulting work. And then over the years, we kind of built up to around about $1 million revenue a year in this region, doing solar racing products and these sorts of products, which are high power inverter for conversions and for people doing specialized vehicles. And then we developed, actually approached by a very large startup here in Australia to develop a fast charger because they couldn't actually find anything that they liked, remotely liked. And so we developed this in the space of about 3 months with expertise we already had developed over the last 10 years. And then from there, that gave us the launching pad to then raise further funds through a Commercialisation Australia grant, which is now called AC. It's been rebranded. And we matched that with some seed funding by one of our first investors, Varley Specialist Vehicles down in Newcastle. And then it was only probably a year later, St. Baker Energy Innovation Trust Fund came along and came out to view the fast charger, which we actually had looking like this at that stage. This funding got us to here. And once they saw that and saw the potential for it and saw where the market was going, decided to also invest. And from there outwards, we've been running very fast ever since, really. Having raised over $9.4 million now and tending to a $10 million turnover this year. So, yeah, the growth has been very hard to keep up with, really. So who are we selling these things to, and who's buying them, who's putting them in the ground is interesting, I think. The energy industry, definitely. So there's utilities around the world are buying these things, putting them in, starting to operate them as profit-making products. They're passive income to them, so it's a great opportunity to increase revenue. The automotive companies are also putting a lot of funding into this area. So programs like No Charge to Charge by Nissan in the USA, where they fund the infrastructure to a certain percentage for people who put that in the ground and then support the Nissan Leaf for the first 2 years of free charging. So that's an important part of the uptake. And then also the startup companies coming into play too. And some of these are backed by network operators as well. So Charge and Drive is actually backed by a big Scandinavian utility. ChargePoint's VC backed, one of our customers, and eWell's a car sharing scheme, but very focused on electric. And ChargeNet self-funded, high net worth individuals set that network up in New Zealand and growing it quite rapidly. So I just wanted to move through some happy snaps so you get a feel for what they all look like in the ground. In the top left-hand corner, we have a Stromnetz installation. So Stromnetz runs the utility for City of Hamburg and City of Berlin. Very focused on Hamburg at the moment. So we're looking to cover that city in fast charging infrastructure. And this is an interesting project because we're working with them to make our charger able to be connected straight to the grid. So no grid connection box separate to the charger. And that makes the installation a lot simpler and cheaper. Then we've got in the US, so very much focused on, we're reselling there and selling to people that want to actually own the infrastructure as a destination point. So it's not someone running a network. They buy it, put it in, attracts people to their location. So a different model, but also working quite well. And we'll start to become a bit of a market leader in the US over the next 12 months. We only entered the market space last year. And this is eWell installed there. It's just been through a snow blizzard. So our chargers are IP65. We're the only one who sell IP65 charger. Everyone else is 54. The reason we can do that is we're liquid cooled. And so we have no exchange of air between the outside world and the inside of our electronics. And that lowers the maintenance cost and the service cost of our chargers, which makes them very attractive to companies like Fortum, who are a massive Scandinavian utility. They're installing these things at a great rate of knots across Norway at the moment. Yeah, they're the company that are doing like 20 charges a day and things like this on these chargers, so making good money off them. This is actually they just bought out EV Power, but EV Power was a customer in Norway, and now Fortum own them. So New Zealand, and I just love this picture because there's a nice steam train in the background and an electric vehicle in the foreground. So these are destination chargers again, you know, one or two at a time. It's great to see starting to get two at a time because if there's any issue with one of them, the other one's there. And this has been a really hard thing with the initial rollout of infrastructure, especially fast charge infrastructure. If you just put one charger, and that's the only one in a 50 or 100k radius, and you end up there with a flat battery pack, and it doesn't work, God help you. They get a very angry customer. So yeah, having two is always great, installed in pairs. And this is UQ Gatton, so just recently installed and operational, been running well. So yeah, Fortum have been installing our chargers, which is very interesting to us. They're obviously assessing how customers like to use different chargers. This is one of our competitors, and this is us. And what we're finding, a lot of the Facebook photos that are going up, is that you quite often see people will choose to go to our charger over the one beside it. It's always empty. And that's because we've paid so much attention to the design and usability of the product and how you interact with it. Very simple. And you can see that as, you know, even when you walk up to that, I mean, you just feel more comfortable working with this than what is this? This is some sort of piece of industrial equipment with hoses hanging out everywhere. So, and you see this again, installed multiple units at a time. So, Canberra. So hopefully we'll start to see a network rollout from Canberra outwards soon. And UQ with Minster Valley only a month ago here. Georgia Power in USA, installing charging systems. So it's really a lot of different people getting into the space. And I just want to point this one out too because our customer in New Zealand, it really wasn't, I guess, it didn't have blinkers on from using other people's products. He went straight to using us. He just started up last year. And so straight away sees the advantage of the slimline design, which we paid a lot of attention to be able to get this charger in places where others can't go. There's no other charger in the world you can put in that location. So that's really important. And the other thing to point out too is everything is in here. This is three-phase connected straight in. So there's no box off in the back corner, which you see with the Tesla charging stations. There's like a big, massive 1 megawatt box over in the back corner somewhere which runs the 6 outlets. That's not the case here. You just drop this straight in and connect to the grid. So I'll just leave that up there and invite the panelists to come up.
Yeah, if Roger and James can come up, and as they're getting themselves sort of mic'd up and ready. Sorry? Oh, lights. Mm-hmm. Let me think about lights while I'm talking. Here we go, lights. So we're going to invite questions, and by all means talk about the energy aspects and electric vehicles and what that means to energy, but also for the students in the room, think about the budding entrepreneurs, I should say. Any questions you've got about, you know, driving innovation and how you start up as an entrepreneur and all those things, these are the guys to ask. So put your hand up for questions, and there are mics rolling around, and while that's happening, I'm just going to kick off with a quick question. Back 10 years, more than 10 years ago, some of us started to think about what are the technologies that were going to drive this low carbon energy innovation, and certainly in the early 2000s, electric vehicles wasn't on our radar at all. It suddenly came out of the blue and surprised us, took us by surprise for a while, but then didn't happen. And there seems to be kind of some false starts, and I thought you might take us through why that's changing or if it's changing, and how, you know, how fast it will go ahead now.
Yeah, I think some of the false starts were actually probably more to do with the technology than anything else, and cost of that technology, especially batteries. As you can see, you've got to build volume to get those battery costs down. There's no intrinsic reason why lithium-ion batteries are expensive. It's a process-driven cost. So as those volumes build, they'll come down. But that took a little bit of business innovation in some ways, and the way Tesla have addressed the market space is really important to understand. To come in at the top level and sell expensive big cars is actually the right move. All the other vehicle manufacturers have come in and gone in low to sell a small little car at a premium, which is an impossible ask of the market, very hard to do. They're only doing it because of government incentives around the world. That's the only reason it's working. Now, that may work out for them because the government incentives have got the volumes up and they'll be able to reduce their costs that way. But coming in at that higher end was a way smarter way of doing it. So, yeah, coming in luxury cars where they can sell them for $150,000, $100,000. And then slowly step down. And you can see Tesla doing that. Step down to the Model 3 now, and then they'll step down to a cheaper car.
Roadster to start with too,
Roadster.
200,000.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, my mind boggles a little bit why the car companies haven't addressed the SUV market space. It's absolutely ripe for it. And I think we'll see that over the next few years where they can address that $60,000, $70,000 market segment. And once we address that, then you build the volumes, then you go to the next market segment, until finally all of a sudden you'll be going out there and deciding that my Yaris is actually cheaper to buy an electric version than a petrol one. And that's what I'm saying will happen in the next decade.
I mean, it's pretty much driven by the battery cost. There's no reason an electric car should cost more than a petrol car. I mean, the drivetrain has 3 moving parts instead of 900 or something. It's purely batteries are expensive, and like Dave said, it's a mass production problem. So it's, yeah, this is not an if anymore. This is not a false start this time.
So there's a question at the back. No. Oh, sorry, there was one up earlier. So we'll grab him first and then you. Well, yeah, why don't you go ahead and you hang.
I noticed on your list of makers that Toyota was not there. Now, Toyota has a pretty big share in the market, I'd say. Toyota also has the hybrid, and they were the start of the hybrids, I suspect, and they're relying upon no government subsidy like $7,500 in the US. What does this mean for strategy? Is it reliant for a battery car? Is it an all-electric car? And a Toyota Prius is obviously a fuel car in the end, but it uses the braking power. It doesn't mean that you're relying upon a government subsidy to go beyond the hybrid into a full electric car.
I think like any entry of a new technology into a space that's competing with a very established technology, there always has to be some sort of government incentive to kickstart that. It's kind of an impossible ask to come in and say produce an electric vehicle at a lower cost to a petrol vehicle when they're producing them in such volume. And when you look at the complexity of an internal combustion engine to an electric drivetrain, it's hard to comprehend how the petrol one's actually cheaper. But it's just the whole embedded cost of that.
We've had 150 years to get really good at making cars cheap. And you come in with the new electric technology and, yeah, you're starting from scratch.
The incentives are already starting to back off in a lot of places. And as you saw with solar, incentives kickstart solar. But then when the incentives get taken away, they still exist and people find ways of making it continue to work without the incentives. And that's what will happen.
Yeah. When does the US subsidy drops off after
each vehicle
200,000
manufacturer
sales or something, I think?
Sales,
yeah, so Tesla will hit that next year. These subsidies are not going to be around for much longer. And it's certainly looking like everything's going to be competitive without them. So, yeah.
Do charging stations charge according to the time of day? Do they charge more money in peak hours?
No, not normally. Normally it's just simply how long you're there for or how many kilowatt hours you just used. It's not normally time of day.
The business side of that is a bit all over the place. I mean, like in the US, Dave pointed out that there's a lot of people buying them to attract customers to their cafe instead of the one down the road. Some of them are a free charge if you buy a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. It's a bit not quite settled yet on exactly how some of these things get charged for.
And I guess that's what I was trying to point out a little bit with the different parts of the world. You know, in Norway it varies much what I just said, the discharging per time, because it is a utility running that service. But when you resell to someone who has a destination location, it's a very different equation. And then you start to think about effectively Nissan are paying when they're doing that no charge to charge program too. So the business models are very interesting, and they're evolving very quickly, and there's lots of scope. So watch this space, actually.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That was fantastic. You said that the incentives or the lack of incentives is a barrier to the electrical vehicle deployment in Australia. But to what extent is the dominance of the electricity generation by fossil fuels also a huge barrier to the industry? And in your view, what do you think the generation mix needs to be, fossil fuels to renewables, to have a positive impact on the electrical vehicle industry?
Well, I think the lack of renewables on the grid is actually a barrier to the incentives. When you look at a lot of the countries that are doing the incentives, the grid's a bit greener. So I think that influences the policy. I think the word barrier is a little bit strong in Australia. Maybe if I did use that, it's probably a delay. It will happen here because we'll take advantage of what's happening around the rest of the world, but it will just happen slower. In terms of the mix that we need here in Australia, I don't think that's that important. I think we can come up with solutions that mean that, if people bought an EV, they're a lot more likely to want to charge that from renewables to start with. And also, there's a lot of business models that you can come up with that end up because EV is a dispatchable load, it is very well suited to renewables to start with. So actually putting more vehicles out onto the grid actually makes it easy to get more renewables out there. And once all the tools are put in place, the technological network tools to do that, then we'll start to see energy retailers, getting a power purchase agreement for renewables or even buying the renewables directly, to put that straight into the vehicles as a preference.
One other thing to point out there too, just with what you started with, was even with Australia's mix of generation, it's still cleaner to drive an EV than a petrol car.
Except for Victoria.
Except for Victoria, where they basically burn dirt. So, it's not much cleaner. But
don't forget about South Australia, where it is a lot cleaner, and Tasmania, where it's almost zero emissions. Full stop. So,
the other thing there too, of course, is once you have these EVs, you can suddenly improve the emissions of hundreds of thousands of cars with a change to the generator and no change to the cars. So, even with the generation mix we have right now, selling EVs is not a dead end. They all improve as you improve the mix. So, there's kind of a nice effect happening there too as a future benefit.
And I think, don't lose sight of the fact that you pay a lot more for energy cost in a vehicle. So there is that opportunity to actually sell that energy at a higher cost than what you would normally buy other electricity for. With the right plan in place.
So we have another question towards the back there.
Your presentation. When the electric vehicle market starts getting a significant market share, do you see there being any material boundaries or supply chain boundaries to this really exploding, or do you see there's some time constraints from this area?
I'm not aware of it.
I don't think there's anything. The one that always gets brought up is lithium, but the reality is a lithium battery only has a few % lithium. I don't think there is. The lithium batteries are probably the thing. It's not really a material constraint, it's a manufacturing constraint. But that's one of the things Tesla's doing. They're building the world's biggest battery factory at the moment, specifically for making batteries for EVs. So, all of these problems are not fundamental showstoppers, I don't think. They're just someone needs to spend the money and tool up and start making them.
I do get a lot of people asking me questions about should I invest in this lithium mine somewhere.
The question I had, the Australian Energy Market Operator put out a fairly interesting report about midway, 3/4 of the way through last year, and the forecast they had in there for EVs in the Australian market was underwhelming, I guess. I was kind of, looking at the drivers there. Did you agree with that forecast? Do you think that there's some sort of limitations to the size of the market, given the, I guess, the geography, and the other factors like the, I guess, current government approach to regulation and that sort of thing?
Where do you start with that? So,
I'd say they were too pessimistic.
well, no, I think we're looking at market forecasts for a project that we're looking to embark upon in Australia, and there's a big range of forecasts, and they're very dependent on getting vehicles here. Like I said, with the release of every new model, there's this surge in sales figures, and so it's one of the biggest problems is actually having vehicles here on the road.
And it comes back to the subsidy question there too. It's not so much that the subsidies are encouraging people to buy cars. It's more that, well, it is, but the car manufacturers are having trouble making these things fast enough, and so why would they bother getting them certified for Australia when there's no subsidies here? They can sell as many cars as they're making in France or Germany, and that's part of the problem too, I think.
The funny thing is it doesn't take much to get a vehicle, at this stage anyway, to get a vehicle manufacturer interested in supplying vehicles to Australia. Like, you go talk to overseas manufacturers, and if you said, I'll buy 3,000 cars, their eyebrows raise very quickly. Okay, yeah, cool, I'll sell you 3,000 cars. That's not a big ask on a nation level to make that commitment.
And from a car manufacturing point of view, 3,000 cars is just nothing. But that is still enough to get them interested, which is kind of
point in time. We just got to get over the homologation, compliance with design rules in Australia. And it's not a huge amount of work, but they do have to do something to get them here.
This in the report were, it said by 2035 we were going to have less than 250,000 vehicles here in Australia.
I think we're a lot more bullish than that.
Yeah.
We have it slow for a bit longer yet, but kicking up quickly. All the forecasts I've seen have been very linear increase. We don't see it like that. We see it will be slow and then come up quickly when we benefit from the rest of the world's experience.
When it hits that point when you can buy an EV for the same price as a petrol car, and then it costs you a quarter of much to operate it, and they're fun to drive and all the rest of it, suddenly everyone's going to buy one. It's going to be really, really quick when it happens.
Well, when you talk about numbers, I mean, one of the interesting things for me has been what happened to petrol-driven cars in China, where they ramped up quite exponentially their manufacturing capacity to produce cars and the take-up of cars to 20 million a year, very quickly. I mean, what's the prospect where the air pollution problem is the most serious for China to really grab onto electric vehicles and make that?
China has, and they're pushing. And like I said, technology is really the limiting factor here in some respects. It's how quickly can they get their vehicle manufacturers with the technology they need to have to produce those vehicles at that rate. And they're going as fast as they can. So, and they understand the benefits of it.
Yeah, well, once they decide to do it, I think they'll do it.
Yeah,
they have
decided.
Yeah, it's happening now.
You already can't buy a petrol scooter in China. They're all electric, and bus fleet's pretty much gone the same way. They're just working on, once again, it's a mass production problem. How do you tool up for 20 million cars a year that are electric?
And get the cost the same as a petrol.
But they're doing it. So there's no question it's happening.
We have Jim.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the business models. We get asked a lot from developers and people that own large properties about putting solar on their roof or their space, or incorporating solar in the way that they integrate with their community, all that sort of thing. And the problem is that as soon as you get into excess, you're into feed-in tariffs, which are now very low. So you get this problem of, well, you can build it to sustain some load you may have, but most of these people are interested in being generators, embedded, heavy output generators. How does the sales value of the electricity into an EV compete with a feed-in tariff? Is it strong?
So if you're in the public space, our Norwegian friends sell their energy at 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So do you want to do that or sell it back at 8? So yeah, if there's an EV there and you've got an EV charger and you've got a zero net export meter that we could supply, and it could feed into the car rather than exporting it, yeah, you could make a fair bit of money in your complex that had solar.
You're saying the unit's like 55 kilowatt hour storage. Is that what? I mean, that was the car, but what sort of storage do you have in the unit itself?
inside the charger. No,
Yeah.
no, it pulls 50
It's
kilowatts
just
from the grid.
it's straight in, okay.
Three-phase power straight from the grid.
Yep, we have a question midway.
Thanks for the talk. You said earlier that Australia is not really leading the change at the moment, but might align itself later on. What are the main reasons why we can't lead the change here? Is it just geographical reason, or what are the main reasons for not leading the change here towards EV?
For what here, sorry?
Towards EV?
We're just a bit behind everybody else, I think. It seems that a lot of high-tech stuff tends to be, Australia's a bit behind the curve, I think. But, yeah, I mean, you look at, when the first ones came on sale here, it was several years after they were overseas. I think we're following the curve from overseas. We're just a few years behind it. So.
I think it was interesting because a lot of the initial research I was following it very closely in 2008, 2009. And all the research showed Australia to be a really great place to come and have an EV network. We think we're geographically dispersed and we need cars to drive us all the way across the country. But when you look at the research, it shows that, well, we should be a really good market for EVs. And so you had all the big international startups like Better Place, Ecotelity, ChargePoint. All these guys descended on Australia going, this is a great place to prove out our business model, get it all working, and we'll take it back home after that. So, but as I said before, I think the technology was a little bit early. They were ahead of the technology in some respects.
Maybe only by a year or two. But
I mean, I think you look at some of what Better Place was trying to achieve at the time.
That was probably
and it's probably only really just coming to fruition now in terms of being able to get access to the vehicles they needed to be able to do what they wanted. But some of the business models were very sound. It was just early. And that also caused the vacuum when two of them disappeared completely, fell over. And they were the bigger players in Australia. So that did cause a bit of a vacuum. And I think in some respects, that also left people wondering, well, does this actually work? All these guys came here with plenty of money. They tried to do it and it didn't work. So I think we're still reeling a little bit from that in some respects. But yeah, we'll see the ramp up over the next few years.
Thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question about network infrastructure. How ready do you think the network is to adopt many electric vehicles in the future? Is there any need for electricity network reinforcement and doing some new changes to the network?
Yeah, I think it will defer network augmentation in suburban areas. I think it has the potential to do that if we do it right. It will require network augmentation in built-up areas, but my feeling is you'll see return on that investment a lot quicker than what you would be seeing at the moment with augmenting suburban areas and having very peaky loads in the afternoon with the air conditioning turning on, things like that. These aren't like that. They're very consistent loads. They come and go during the day, but they're at least consistent over a 24-hour period.
Also, don't forget there that most charging is not through a fast charger at random times. Most charging is you come home, you plug your car in, and then at 10 o'clock at night when you're on cheap electricity, it turns on. So you can have quite a high vehicle EV penetration of the market. I think it's 40-something% off the top of my head before you actually start running into any issues, because all of those cars are charging off-peak when we have excess capacity anyway. So they're quite a good match to the existing distribution infrastructure.
And I think further to that, you touched on in your presentation, Dave, the possibility of demand management when you've got that energy storage in the EV, the battery in the EV sitting in your house, helping to, if that's controlled by the distributor, helping to manage the overall demand on the system.
Especially when you go bi-directional.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, once you go bi-directional with vehicle to home and not vehicle to grid, and we ran some simulations on that, and the energy retailer could actually afford to pay the customer $700 a year for owning that EV and that fast charger in like a 12 kilowatt fast charger, something fairly fast, that could put power back to the house. So when they come home, plug in the evening, rather than adding to the peak, they're actually subtracting from the peak because the home disappears off the grid. And so those sorts of things are even more than just deferring, having a dispatchable load. It's more than that. It's actually been able to take the home off the grid, so the home is dispatchable in some respects. And that's before you even start looking at feeding power back to the grid, which is another equation again.
There's one question down the front.
Just had a question about the greenhouse gas efficiency. You said during this recent discussion that with Australia's current mix of energy generation, an EV is slightly cleaner than a petrol car, but there was a slide that said, I think indicated an EV was 2/3 more efficient than a petrol car from a greenhouse gas perspective. But is that correct, and under what conditions would that apply? That was the pie chart.
That was straight energy. So, and it's comparing liquid energy against electrical energy. Right.
So a petrol car is only 30% efficient, and an electric car is 80 or 90% efficient. So that was that reduction.
So if you go take that extra 2/3 and chuck that back into a coal-fired power generation, you're back up to a similar sort of amount, right? But if you generate from solar or wind, you don't need to do that at all. You just got to generate the real electrical bit. Yes.
Okay. So if it's renewable generation mix, you get the double whammy of a more efficient vehicle and a very low carbon emission source. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
We have another question at the far.
The elephant in the room is commercial and heavy transport. You said before that represents a major component of the air emissions from transport. Are there any moves for Tritium to move into large-scale charging systems for trucks, particularly since it seems that the European manufacturers, Mercedes, Scania, are working towards autonomous trucking systems,
yes,
which would need either more onboard storage or more position to recharge their vehicles. Any thoughts on that?
There's been a bit of work with electric buses, but that's mainly for urban type transport where they're only running a few hundred kilometres per day and then they can charge overnight. I think, I don't know, personal opinion there probably, but I would say the technology is not quite there for long distance transport for trucks just yet.
We've seen some really nice hybrids trucks, which make a hell of a lot of sense. Enough battery capacity to drive up the hill, regen down the other side, not just braking, but get all the way over a hill. That increases the efficiency dramatically. But for long-haul trucking, we don't see it. We don't see the technology being ready in the near term.
It needs another step change improvement in batteries, I think, before. I mean, you could do it now, but you'd be dropping your 40-tonne load on a truck to 20 tonnes or something because you're carrying 20 tonnes of batteries. You could do it, but it wouldn't be sensible. When
I was pointing at that before, that the 66% of emissions is actually light vehicles. Trucks are just this bit down here. So it is a big portion of other emissions, but the elephant in the room is the light vehicles.
Oh, sorry, Clive again.
Going on forwards 15, 20 years, I think the aim is not to have any fossil fuel at all unless it's absolutely necessary. So it doesn't come back to battery technology. There won't be any off-peak power at night time. There just won't be any unless you have nuclear power or you have fossil fuel.
The wind blows at night.
Or battery comes back to the battery, or battery storage.
It's not just solar, but we've got all sorts of renewables generation. You've got hydro, you've got wind, you've got wave.
Well, yeah, but hydro.
And wind is the big one, because wind at the moment you can't install pretty much more than what we have in Australia right now, because it blows whenever, 2 a.m, and no one is going to build a new wind farm if there isn't a guaranteed load to buy that power. Well, electric cars give you that guaranteed load. So now you can build a heap of wind, because you know whenever the wind blows, you've got a couple of 100,000 customers out there who are going to buy it. So the peak off-peak thing kind of changes. Yeah, you'll probably end up with storage in your house as well as in your car, but the end result is a way higher percentage of renewables actually generating that electricity.
But I mean, normally hydro would be used in peak power. You just switch it on and off when needed. But taking that point of yours, surely it comes back to battery technology in the end, because if you can store renewable energy, you're home and hosed.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And how do you see that technology going?
Well, it's a mass production problem again.
Tied together.
Yeah, it's, lithium batteries as they are right now, I mean, guarantee you, and 10, 15, 20 years' time, there's probably going to be something that's better. But right now, they're good enough. They just cost too much. And so you start building bigger battery factories, you make them cheaper. I mean, Tesla are talking about making them for, I think, $100 a kilowatt hour, which is a quarter of what it was 5 years ago. And at that point, you can stick a 5 or 10 kilowatt hour battery pack in your garage and get your house 95 or 99% off the grid. So yeah, you're right, battery storage changes everything, and it's happening. The stationary battery storage and your mobile battery storage in your electric car are intimately related. The same technology drives both of them.
Yeah. The thing to keep in mind, Bud, is people, as they buy EVs, they're buying the EV to have the range they never need, in some respects, because it impacts the buying decision. You're not going to buy the car unless you can do 300 k's, but on average in Australia, you're going to drive 40 k's a day. That's on average, and a lot of people are going to drive less. So you've got this huge battery capacity that you paid for, and it's an opportunity to use it for storing, sucking down this wind and solar and hydro when it's going.
And we have a question there.
Is that me? Yeah, that's it. To your knowledge, are the oil majors interested in converting some of their retail real estate into EV, or is that something that you're aware that they're considering?
You're talking about service stations?
I'm talking about, service stations.
I think that's, we are talking to service station operators.
The guy in New Zealand has half his charges at service stations.
Yeah, it's definitely a model they'll adopt. But the thing is it's more, rather than being at a service station, it's more important it's at a place where you're trying to sell something else. Yeah. And this is the interesting thing with EV charging, right, is if you have enough EV penetration, well, if I'm Coles or Woolies, I'm not going to go buy petrol stations anymore. I'll just put charging stations out the front of my actual store.
Yeah, I mean, Dave alluded to this too. It's that you don't charge your electric car like your petrol car. You don't run it empty and then go fill it up. You plug it in whenever you have the chance, like when you get home. But if you want to, even fast charging, you want to stop somewhere for 20 minutes. You don't want to go to some grotty servo somewhere for 20 minutes. You want to go to a cafe for 20 minutes. So you're far more likely to see this charging infrastructure go in at places where people would have gone anyway or would want to go. Now, they are going in at servos because they're scattered around, they're in good locations, they usually have a decent power feed, but I think long term that's probably not where you're going to see this stuff. It'll be at cafes, McDonald's, cinemas, shopping centres, that sort of thing.
Workplaces.
Yeah.
Thank you for the fantastic presentation. So since EVs are still relatively new entrant technology, that hasn't been tested to its full lifespan, how do you reckon the lifespan of battery-run EVs, and in terms of how many charges that battery can handle in its lifespan, and how do you think that will affect the commercialization of EVs when compared to internal combustion engine run vehicles?
It's pretty much a non-issue already. So the sort of batteries that are going into cars are 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 charge-discharge cycles, and that's full depth cycles. So even if you were driving your car 300 k's a day or whatever the range is, you're talking a 10 to 15 year life out of the battery pack. And